Hey there, sleepy history buffs. Tonight, we're settling in for a long, grim journey. Not to lull you with cozy tales, but to plunge you into the mud-soaked, blood-stained reality of being a soldier in the Napoleonic Wars. Forget the shiny uniforms and heroic paintings. Life as a grunt in Napoleon's armies, or those fighting against him, was a relentless grind of misery, danger, and sheer exhaustion. From the moment you enlisted or were dragged into service, your days were numbered, and not in a good way. So, grab a blanket, dim the lights, and let's march into the chaos of early 19th century warfare, where survival was a miracle and comfort was a myth. Welcome to Boring History for Sleep. Why being a soldier in the Napoleonic Wars was awful. Let's start at the beginning, because it only gets worse from here. Picture this, it's 1805 and you're a farmer, a baker, or maybe just some poor soul minding your own business in a village somewhere in France, Prussia, or Britain. Then, one day, recruiters show up. Maybe they're waving a flag, promising glory, or maybe they're just thugs who press gang you into service because Napoleon needs bodies for his Grande Armée, or the British need cannon fodder to stop him. Enlistment wasn't always a choice. In France, conscription was the law. Napoleon's war machine devoured men aged 20 to 25 like a beast with an endless appetite. If you were lucky enough to dodge the draft, you might have been bribed with a few coins or the promise of adventure. Spoiler: there's no adventure, just suffering. Across Europe, armies swelled with reluctant recruits, many of whom had never held a musket before. You're handed a uniform, if you can call it that. It's a scratchy wool jacket, often too big or too small, dyed in whatever color your nation picked to make you a target. French soldiers wore blue, British red, Prussians dark green, but the dye faded fast, and soon you're just a muddy, tattered mess like everyone else. Your first day as a soldier starts with a rude awakening, literally. No gentle alarm clock here. It's a sergeant screaming in your face at dawn, or earlier, because armies march at brutal hours. Your bed? A patch of dirt, maybe a thin blanket if you're lucky, or a pile of damp straw if you're bivouacking near a farm. Tents are for officers, not you. You sleep in the open, rain or shine, with your knapsack as a pillow. That knapsack, by the way, weighs about 60 pounds, stuffed with your musket, ammunition, a few crusts of bread, and whatever you haven't lost to thieves or rot. You wake up stiff, sore, and probably soaked. The air smells of smoke, sweat, and the guy next to you who hasn't bathed since the reign of Louis XVI. Hygiene? What's that? You're lucky if there's a stream nearby, but even then, the water's probably tainted with camp runoff, human waste, dead horses, you name it. Let's talk about that musket, your new best friend and worst enemy. It's a flintlock, heavy as a sack of bricks, and about as reliable as a drunk tavern singer. Loading it is a nightmare. You bite open a paper cartridge, pour gunpowder down the barrel, ram a lead ball in with a rod, and pray the flint doesn't misfire when you pull the trigger. In ideal conditions, you might get off 3 shots a minute if you're fast and the weather's kind. But in the chaos of battle, with rain soaking your powder or your hands shaking from fear, you're lucky to fire once before the enemy's bayonets are in your face. Accuracy? Laughable. Muskets are only effective at about 50 yards, so battles are fought close, personal, and bloody. You're not a sharpshooter. You're part of a human wall, firing in volleys, hoping to overwhelm the enemy through sheer volume of lead. Training? Barely. If you're a conscript, you might get a few weeks of drilling. Marching in lines, learning to load your musket without blowing your hand off, and mastering the art of not running away when the cannons start roaring. Officers don't care about your feelings. Discipline is brutal. Step out of line and you're flogged 50 lashes for insubordination, more if you desert. Deserters who get caught face a firing squad or worse, public humiliation before execution. The army's logic is simple. Fear of punishment keeps you in line better than promises of glory. You learn to march in tight formations, shoulder to shoulder, because that's how you survive the chaos of battle. But it also makes you a perfect target for enemy artillery. Spoiler, you're not surviving this war unscathed. Let's talk food, or what passes for it. Your daily ration is supposed to include bread, meat, and maybe some wine or spirits, but supposed to is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. Supply lines are a mess. Armies move fast, and wagons carrying food often lag behind or get looted by desperate soldiers. Your bread is hard as stone, baked weeks ago and crawling with weevils. You're told to eat around the bugs, they're extra protein, right? Meat, if you get it, is stringy, salted beef or pork that's more gristle than nourishment. Fresh vegetables? A dream. You might scavenge onions or turnips from a nearby field, but only if the locals haven't already been stripped bare by your comrades. Water is a gamble. Rivers and wells near camps are often fouled, so you drink weak wine or beer if you're lucky, or nothing at all if you're not. Dysentery, nicknamed the bloody flux, is your constant companion, turning your insides into a battlefield of their own. You're hungry, tired, and already regretting every life choice that led you here, but the day's just getting started. Marching is your life now. Armies in the Napoleonic Wars covered insane distances, 20-30 miles a day, sometimes more, in blistering heat or freezing rain. Your boots, if you have them, are leather disasters, falling apart after a week of slogging through mud. Many soldiers go barefoot, their feet bloodied by rocks and frozen by winter. You carry that 60-pound knapsack, plus your musket, bayonet, and whatever you've scavenged to stay alive. The roads are terrible, muddy tracks or dusty ruts, churned up by thousands of feet and hooves. You march in columns, choking on dust or slipping in slime, while officers on horseback bark orders. Stragglers are left behind, and if you fall too far, you're at the mercy of bandits, deserters, or angry locals who hate your army for pillaging their crops. The worst part? You're not even fighting yet. This is just the prelude. Battles are coming, and they're worse than you can imagine. But for now, you're stuck in this endless cycle of marching, camping, and starving, with the constant threat of disease or discipline hanging over you. If you're in Napoleon's army, you're part of a machine that's conquered half of Europe, but it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like surviving hour by hour. And if you're fighting against him in the British, Prussian, or Russian ranks, it's no better, just a different flag to die for. By the end of your first week, you're wondering if death might be a mercy. Spoiler, it's not. It's just slower and uglier than you thought. So, you've survived your first week as a soldier in the Napoleonic Wars, barely. Your feet are blistered, your stomach's gnawing at itself, and you're starting to realize that the recruiter's promises of glory were as empty as your water canteen. But let's keep moving, because the real nightmare isn't the endless marches or the bug-infested bread. It's what's waiting for you when the drums beat for battle. Welcome to the meat grinder of Napoleonic warfare, where being a soldier doesn't just test your endurance, it tests your will to stay human. Let's dive into day-to-day life on campaign, the prelude to the chaos, and why even the quiet moments were a special kind of hell. You're on the move constantly, part of a massive army, tens of thousands strong, snaking across Europe like a hungry beast. Napoleon's Grande Armée, or the Allied forces opposing him, could number up to 600,000 men at their peak. A logistical nightmare that turned every campaign into a struggle for survival long before the first shot was fired. Your life is dictated by the rhythm of the march. You wake at 4 a.m., if you slept at all, to the sound of bugles or drums. You pack up your meager belongings, sling that back-breaking knapsack over your shoulder, and start walking. The pace is relentless. Napoleon was famous for his lightning-fast maneuvers, forcing his men to cover ground at breakneck speed to outflank the enemy. A typical day's march could be 15 to 20 miles, but forced marches, when the emperor was in a hurry, could hit 30 or more. Your legs burn, your boots, if they're still intact, rub your feet raw, and the weight of your gear makes every step feel like a punch to the spine. The weather is your enemy as much as the opposing army. Summer campaigns mean choking on dust clouds kicked up by thousands of boots and hooves, the sun baking you inside your wool uniform. Sweat soaks through everything, and there's no shade, no break, just the endless trudge. If you're in Spain or southern Italy, the heat is a furnace, and dehydration is a real killer. Winter is worse. Imagine marching through Germany or Russia in threadbare clothes, your fingers numb, your breath freezing in the air. The Russian campaign of 1812 was a frozen hell. Soldiers wrapped their feet in rags after their boots disintegrated, and frostbite claimed toes, fingers, and noses. You're not just cold. You're so cold you stop feeling it, which is when you know you're in trouble. Frostbite wasn't treated with medicine. It was treated with amputation if you were lucky enough to find a surgeon. If not, you just kept marching until gangrene finished the job. Camp life isn't much better. When the army finally stops for the night, you don't get a cozy tent or a warm bed. You're lucky if you find a dry patch of ground. Most of the time, you're sleeping in a field, a forest, or a muddy ditch. If you're near a village, you might try to requisition shelter, fancy talk for looting a farmer's barn. But don't expect a warm welcome. Locals hate you whether you're French, British, or Russian. Armies lived off the land, which meant taking whatever food, livestock, or supplies they could find. You and your comrades strip fields bare, slaughter pigs, and empty granaries. The villagers can't fight back, but they'll spit in your face or poison the well if they get the chance. You're not a hero to them, you're a plague. Speaking of plagues, let's talk about disease, the real killer of the Napoleonic Wars. Forget glorious battles. More soldiers died from sickness than from bullets or bayonets. Camps were breeding grounds for disease, with thousands of unwashed men crammed together, no sanitation, and latrines that were just open pits or worse, no pits at all. It's no surprise that dysentery, typhus, and cholera ran rampant. Dysentery alone could wipe out entire regiments, leaving men too weak to march, curled up in their own filth, praying for death to come quickly. Lice were everywhere, burrowing into your clothes, your hair, your skin. They carried typhus, nicknamed camp fever, which could kill you in days with high fevers and delirium. Clean water was a fantasy. You drank from streams fouled by waste or dead bodies. And if you were lucky, you had a sip of vinegar-tainted wine to dull the taste. Medical care? We'll get to that disaster later, but for now, know that a fever was often a death sentence. Food remains a constant struggle. Your official rations are a cruel joke. Maybe a pound of bread and a scrap of meat if the supply wagons make it through. But wagons get stuck in mud, raided by guerrillas, or just don't show up. You're forced to forage, which is a polite way of saying stealing. You raid farms, orchards, or even your own comrades' knapsacks. If you're in a hostile country like Spain, where guerrilla fighters made life hell for Napoleon's troops, foraging is a death trap. Spanish peasants would ambush foragers, leaving their bodies in ditches as a warning. You might find a potato or a handful of grain, but cooking it is another ordeal. You build a fire with whatever wood you can scavenge, but wet kindling means choking smoke and half-cooked food. If you're lucky, you share a pot of watery soup with your squad, flavored with dirt and desperation. Starvation wasn't just a risk, it was a way of life. Your uniform is falling apart by now. The wool itches constantly, and it's either too hot or not warm enough. Buttons pop off, seams rip, and patches are a luxury you don't have. If you're a French soldier, your greatcoat is your lifeline, but it's heavy, waterlogged in rain, and a breeding ground for lice. Shoes are the real tragedy. Most soldiers wore cheap leather boots that disintegrated in weeks. Marching barefoot through mud or snow wasn't uncommon, and every step was agony. Officers might have better gear, but you're a common soldier, so you make do with what you've got, or what you can steal from a dead comrade. Yes, scavenging the dead was standard. A good pair of boots or a dry blanket was worth more than gold. Comradeship is your only saving grace, but even that's complicated. You form tight bonds with the men in your unit, your messmates, because they're the only ones keeping you sane. You share food, swap stories, and try to laugh off the misery. But trust is fragile. Men steal from each other, fight over scraps, or betray one another to avoid punishment. Desertion is tempting, especially when you're starving and haven't been paid in months. Pay, by the way, is another broken promise. Soldiers were supposed to get wages, but they rarely arrived on time, if at all. Some men deserted to join the enemy, hoping for better treatment, only to find the other side was just as bad. If you're caught deserting, it's a bullet or a noose, but the risk might seem worth it when you're ankle-deep in mud with nothing but a moldy crust to eat. The constant threat of violence hangs over you, even when you're not in battle. Officers enforce discipline with fists, whips, or worse. A wrong look could earn you a beating. If you're in the British Army, flogging is an art form, hundreds of lashes for minor offenses, leaving your back a bloody mess. In Napoleon's army, discipline was slightly less sadistic, but not by much. And then there's the enemy, not just the soldiers you'll face in battle, but the civilians who hate you. In Spain, guerrilla fighters didn't just kill, they tortured. French soldiers captured by guerrillas might be flayed alive or left staked to the ground. You learn quickly to travel in groups and sleep with one eye open. By now, you're starting to understand why being a soldier in the Napoleonic Wars was a waking nightmare. You're not a hero. You're a cog in a machine, ground down by hunger, disease, and the endless march. But all of this, the mud, the lice, the starvation, is just the warm-up. The real horror comes when you hear the order to form ranks and fix bayonets. Battle is coming, and it's going to make you wish you'd stayed in that muddy ditch. For now, you keep marching, one aching step at a time, wondering if you'll live to see tomorrow. Spoiler, the odds aren't in your favor. All right, you're still with us, trudging through the misery of a soldier's life in the Napoleonic Wars. You've endured the brutal marches, the rotten food, and the ever-present threat of disease or a sergeant's whip. But now, the drums are beating, the bugles are blaring, and the air is thick with the promise of violence. You're about to step into the heart of what made being a soldier in this era truly awful: the battlefield. Napoleonic battles weren't just fights. They were chaotic, deafening, bloody spectacles where survival was a roll of the dice and death was as likely from bad luck as from skill. Let's march into the carnage and see why standing in a line with a musket was a one-way ticket to hell. It's the morning of a battle, maybe Austerlitz in 1805, Borodino in 1812, or Waterloo in 1815. You've been marching for days, maybe weeks, to get here. Your stomach's empty, your boots are gone, and your nerves are frayed from the constant dread. As dawn breaks, you're roused from your muddy patch of ground and ordered to form ranks. You line up shoulder to shoulder with your comrades, rows deep, in a formation that feels more like a funeral procession than a fighting force. The officers shout orders, but their voices are drowned out by the pounding of your own heart. Across the field, you see the enemy, another wall of men, their bayonets glinting in the morning light, their flags snapping in the wind. The distance between you is maybe a few hundred yards, but it feels like an eternity and no time at all. The battle starts with the cannons. Artillery was the king of the Napoleonic battlefield, and you're about to learn why. Each side has dozens, maybe hundreds of cannons, each firing iron balls that weigh anywhere from 6 to 12 pounds. When they hit, they don't just kill, they obliterate. A cannonball can tear through a line of men, ripping off limbs, smashing torsos, and leaving nothing but screams and blood in its wake. Worse still is grape shot, canisters packed with smaller balls that turn a cannon into a giant shotgun, spraying death across a wide arc. If you're lucky, you're far enough away to only hear the whistle of the shot. If you're not, you're watching your best friend get turned into red mist. You stand there, musket in hand, ordered to hold your position as the ground shakes and the air fills with smoke and the stench of gunpowder. Then come the volleys. Your officer screams, "Present! Fire!" You raise your musket, aim at the blurry mass of the enemy, and pull the trigger. The recoil slams into your shoulder, and the smoke blinds you. You can't even tell if you hit anything. Reloading is a frantic dance. Bite the cartridge, pour the powder, ram the ball, prime the pan, all while your hands shake and the enemy fires back. Their volleys rip through your ranks, and men drop around you, some screaming, some eerily silent. A musket ball doesn't always kill outright. It can lodge in your arm, leg, or gut, leaving you to bleed out slowly on the field. The noise is unbearable. Cannons booming, muskets cracking, men shouting, horses screaming, and the constant drumbeat urging you forward. You can't think, only act, and even that feels futile. The real terror comes when the lines close. If neither side breaks, the battle turns into a bayonet charge. You fix your bayonet, a 17-inch blade on the end of your musket, and charge into the enemy. This isn't fencing. It's a brutal, desperate melee. You stab, slash, or club anything in front of you, hoping to kill before you're killed. Bayonet wounds are horrific, tearing through flesh and bone, and there's no mercy in the heat of it. Men grapple in the mud, faces contorted in fear and rage. You might slip on blood or trip over a corpse, And if you go down, you're likely to be trampled or stabbed before you can get up. Cavalry adds to the nightmare. Thundering horses with saber-wielding riders who cut through infantry like a scythe. If you're caught in the open by a cuirassier or a hussar, you're as good as dead. The battlefield is a sensory overload of smoke, blood, and chaos. You can't see more than a few feet through the gunpowder haze. The ground is littered with bodies, broken muskets, and abandoned gear. Horses lie dead or thrashing in agony, their riders pinned beneath them. The wounded scream for help, but no one's coming. Officers shout orders, but half the time you can't hear them over the din. If your line breaks, it's a rout. Men flee in panic, only to be cut down by pursuing cavalry or shot by their own officers for cowardice. If you hold, you're still in the line of fire, waiting for the next volley or charge to claim you. And all the while, the cannons keep firing, indifferent to who they hit. If you survive the battle, you're not out of danger. The aftermath is its own kind of horror. The field is a slaughterhouse, strewn with the dead and dying. You might be ordered to collect the wounded, but there's no triage system, no medevac. You drag your injured comrades to a makeshift hospital, a tent or a barn if you're lucky, a patch of grass if you're not. The air reeks of blood, rot, and gunpowder. You step over bodies, some still twitching, others already stiff. Scavengers, human and animal, move in quickly. Fellow soldiers strip the dead for boots, coats, or anything valuable, while crows and dogs pick at the remains. You try not to look, but you can't unsee it. Wounds are a death sentence more often than not. A musket ball in the leg might lead to amputation, performed without anesthesia by a surgeon whose tools are caked in blood. Gangrene sets in fast, and infection is almost guaranteed. If you're gut shot, you're done for. There's no saving a perforated intestine in 1815. Even a minor wound can turn septic in the filthy conditions of a field hospital. You lie there, surrounded by moaning men, while flies buzz and the surgeon saws through someone's leg nearby. If you're lucky, you get a swig of rum to dull the pain. If not, you bite down on a stick and scream. Most don't make it. The lucky ones die quickly. The unlucky linger for days, feverish and forgotten. And here's the kicker. Surviving a battle doesn't mean you're safe. You might march straight into another one tomorrow. Napoleon's campaigns were relentless, with battles strung together across weeks or months. The Battle of Borodino in 1812 saw 70,000 casualties in a single day, and the survivors were back on the march soon after. You don't get time to grieve or recover. You just keep going until you drop. The psychological toll is immense. You've seen men torn apart, friends die screaming, and you're starting to wonder if you're next. Shell shock wasn't a term yet, but you're living it, numb, jumpy, haunted by the faces of the dead. For now, you're still alive, standing on a field of carnage, your musket still smoking, your ears ringing. The battle's over, but the war isn't. You're ordered to regroup, to march again, to face another day of this madness. You're not a soldier anymore. You're a survivor, clinging to the slim hope that you'll make it through one more fight. But deep down, you know the truth. The Napoleonic Wars don't care about your hopes. They only care about your blood. You're still here, somehow dragging yourself through the aftermath of a Napoleonic battle, your hands trembling, your mind numb from the carnage. The battlefield is behind you, but its ghosts cling to your tattered uniform. You've seen what war does to men, both the living and the dead, and you're starting to wonder if you're more machine than human, marching on despite the horror. But the Napoleonic Wars don't pause for reflection. You're a soldier, and your job isn't just to fight. It's to survive the endless grind between battles, the relentless campaigns that break bodies and spirits alike. Let's dive into the soul-crushing reality of life on campaign, where even the quiet days are a slow-motion torture, and the specter of death never leaves your side. After the battle, you're ordered to march again. Your regiment, or what's left of it, is a shadow of its former self. Men you laughed with yesterday are gone, dead, wounded, or missing. The survivors are hollow-eyed, their faces smeared with dirt and gunpowder. You don't talk about the battle. There's no point. Words can't capture the screams or the sight of a cannonball tearing through a line of men. Instead, you focus on the next step, the next mile, because stopping means thinking, and thinking means breaking. The army's moving to a new position, maybe to chase the enemy, maybe to retreat, maybe just to find food. You don't know the grand strategy. You're not Napoleon or Wellington. You're just a grunt, and your world is mud, hunger, and the weight of your knapsack. The campaign trail is a nightmare of its own. You're not marching to a single glorious battle. You're part of a months-long slog across Europe, from the sun-scorched plains of Spain to the frozen steppes of Russia. Napoleon's wars were fought on a massive scale, with armies crisscrossing continents, leaving trails of devastation. A single campaign could last a year, with soldiers enduring endless marches, skirmishes, and sieges. You might cover thousands of miles in a year, your body wearing down with every step. Your knees ache, your back screams, and your feet are a bloody mess, whether from blisters or frostbite. The roads are barely roads, rutted tracks that turn to sludge in rain or choke you with dust in summer. You stumble over rocks, roots, or the occasional corpse left from a previous fight. The lucky ones ride in supply wagons, but those are for the wounded or the officers. You walk always. Hunger is your constant companion. The army's supply system is a disaster, especially when you're deep in enemy territory. Napoleon's armies lived off the land, which sounded fine until you realized the land was often stripped bare by the time you arrived. Villages you pass through are ghost towns. Their inhabitants fled or dead, their fields burned to deny you food. If you're lucky, you find a hidden cache of grain or a stray chicken, but more often, you're eating soup made from boiled grass or chewing on leather to dull the pain in your gut. Starvation was so common that soldiers turned to desperate measures, eating horses, dogs, or even rats. During the retreat from Moscow in 1812, French soldiers resorted to cannibalism, cutting flesh from frozen corpses to survive. You're not there yet, but every empty day brings you closer to that edge. Disease continues to stalk you. The filth of camp life, unwashed bodies, open latrines, and rotting food breeds sickness like a plague. Typhus, dysentery, and smallpox are your real enemies, killing more men than any battle. You're covered in lice, and every scratch risks infection. Your clothes are stiff with sweat and grime, and washing them is a fantasy. If you're near a river, you might dunk yourself in, but the water's likely contaminated, and drying off in the cold just invites pneumonia. Your comrades drop one by one, their faces gray, their bodies racked with fever. There's no hospital, no medicine, just a surgeon's tent where the lucky get a quick death and the unlucky get a saw. You've seen men beg to be shot rather than face the surgeon's knife, and you can't blame them. The weather keeps punishing you. If you're campaigning in Spain, the sun is a relentless hammer, burning your skin and drying up every stream. Heat stroke fells men mid-march, their bodies left where they fall. In Russia or Germany, winter is a different beast. The cold seeps into your bones, turning your fingers clumsy and your breath into ice. You wrap your hands in rags, but they still crack and bleed. Fires are hard to maintain. Wood is scarce, and wet kindling mocks your efforts. You huddle with your comrades for warmth, but it's never enough. During the Russian retreat, thousands froze to death, their bodies stacked like cordwood along the road. You're not in Russia yet, but every gust of wind reminds you it's coming. Discipline remains a constant threat. Officers are gods in this world, and you're nothing. A missed salute, a slow response, or a stolen loaf of bread can earn you a flogging. In the British Army, the cat-o'-nine-tails is a feared tool, tearing your back to shreds with every lash. Napoleon's army prefers quicker punishments, a punch to the face or a knight tied to a tree. But the message is the same: obey or suffer. Desertion is the ultimate sin, and the penalty is death. You've seen men shot by firing squad, their bodies left as warnings. Yet you understand why they ran. The promise of freedom, even for a day, is a siren's call when you're starving and scared. You've thought about it, but the fear of capture keeps you in line. Deserters rarely escape. Locals turn them in for rewards, or they're hunted down by cavalry. Your only respite is the rare moment of camaraderie. Around a flickering campfire, you and your messmates share a crust of bread or a story from home. You talk about anything but the war. Your mother's cooking, a girl you left behind, or a tavern you'll never see again. These moments are fleeting, but they're what keep you human. You might sing a song, if your throat isn't too dry, or pass around a flask of looted wine. But even these bonds are fragile. You've seen friends turn on each other over a scrap of food or a warm coat. Trust is a luxury, and survival often trumps loyalty. The enemy isn't just across the battlefield. They're all around you. In Spain, guerrilla fighters haunt the hills, picking off stragglers with knives or muskets. You've heard stories of captured soldiers tortured, skinned alive, crucified, or worse. In Russia, Cossacks are the stuff of nightmares, swooping in on horseback to slaughter anyone who falls behind. Even civilians are a threat. A farmer whose crops you stole might slip poison into your water or lead you into an ambush. You learn to sleep with your musket close if you sleep at all. Nightmares wake you, filled with the faces of the dead or the fear of what's coming. You're starting to lose track of time. Days blend into weeks, weeks into months. The campaign drags on, and you're not sure if you're fighting for victory or just survival. You hear rumors of great battles, Austerlitz, Jena, Wagram, but they mean nothing to you. Your world is the next march, the next meal, the next moment you're not dead. You're not a hero. You're a ghost, haunting the edges of a war too big to comprehend. And yet, you keep going because stopping means dying, and you're not ready for that. You're still trudging along, a shadow of the man you were when you first laced up those ill-fitting boots, or what's left of them. The Napoleonic Wars have stripped you down to raw survival. Each day a blur of pain, fear, and the faint hope that you'll see another sunrise. You've survived battles, marches, and the gnawing hunger that's become as familiar as your own heartbeat. But the war doesn't care about your resilience. It's a machine, and you're just a cog grinding away until you break. Now, let's sink deeper into the final layers of this nightmare. The sieges, the retreats, and the crushing reality of being a soldier when the war turns against you. These are the moments that don't make it into the history books, the ones that haunt you long after the cannons fall silent. Let's start with sieges because they're a special kind of hell. If you thought battles were bad, sieges are battles stretched out over weeks or months, trapping you in a cycle of boredom, starvation, and sudden violence. Imagine you're part of a French army besieging a fortified city, maybe Badajoz in Spain or Smolensk in Russia. Your job is to starve the defenders into submission or blast through their walls. But the reality is you're just as miserable as they are. You dig trenches under enemy fire, inching closer to the walls while cannonballs and musket shots rain down. The work is backbreaking, shoveling dirt in the dark, knowing a sniper could pick you off at any moment. Your officers don't care about your safety. They just want the trench done before dawn. If you're lucky, you're not the one storming the breach. When the cannons finally punch a hole in the city's walls, the assault is a suicide mission. You're sent in with ladders and bayonets, climbing over the bodies of your comrades into a meat grinder of boiling oil, rocks, and enemy steel. The defenders fight like cornered animals because surrender often means death or worse for their families. If you take the city, the aftermath is grim. Soldiers, driven mad by hunger and fear, turn into looters and worse. Pillage is unofficially encouraged. Your officers look the other way as you ransack homes for food or valuables. But the locals fight back, hiding knives under their cloaks, and you're never safe, even in victory. If you're on the other side, defending a city, it's no better. You're trapped, rations dwindling, eating rats or shoe leather while the enemy pounds your walls with artillery. Civilians glare at you, blaming you for their suffering, and disease spreads like wildfire in the cramped, filthy streets. You man the walls, firing at shadows, knowing every day brings you closer to starvation or a final, desperate fight. Surrender might save your life, but it's no guarantee. Napoleon's armies weren't known for mercy, and neither were their enemies. The siege of Saragossa in 1808 to 2009 saw tens of thousands die, soldiers and civilians alike, in a brutal standoff that left the city a ruin. You're not at Saragossa, but every siege feels like it could be your last. Now, let's talk about retreats because they're where hope goes to die. If your army loses a battle or overextends itself, you're not just marching back, you're running for your life. The retreat from Moscow in 1812 is the stuff of legend, but every retreat is a nightmare in miniature. Imagine you're a French soldier, fleeing Russia as winter closes in. Your army, once 600,000 strong, is a ragged band of survivors, hunted by Cossacks and vengeful peasants. The roads are frozen, your boots are gone, and you're wrapping your feet in straw or stolen rags. Food is a memory, you're boiling tree bark or sucking on bones from a horse that died a week ago. The cold is a living thing, clawing at your skin, turning your fingers black with frostbite. You've seen men sit down by the roadside, too weak to go on, their eyes empty as they freeze in place. The enemy doesn't let up. Cossacks swoop in, their lances gleaming, cutting down stragglers like wolves picking off sheep. You're too weak to fight back, your musket useless without dry powder. Your officers are gone, dead, deserted, or just as lost as you. Discipline collapses. Men turn on each other, stealing food or blankets, stabbing comrades for a crust of bread. You've heard whispers of cannibalism, and though you swear you'd never sink that low, your stomach growls a different story. The wounded are left behind, their screams fading as you march on, because stopping means joining them. You're not an army anymore. You're a mob, driven by fear and the primal urge to survive. Even in less apocalyptic retreats, like the British withdrawal to Corunna in 1809, the suffering is relentless. You're harried by enemy skirmishers, your supply wagons abandoned, your morale shattered. The locals, who might have tolerated you on the advance, now see you as prey. They ambush your column, loot your dead, and melt back into the hills. You're not fighting for king or country now. You're fighting to reach the coast, to find a ship, to escape this hell. But the sea is far, and every mile feels like a lifetime. The psychological toll is unbearable. You've seen too much. Friends torn apart by grape shot, villages burned to ash, children starving in the streets. You don't sleep anymore, not really. When you close your eyes, you see the battlefield, hear the screams. You flinch at every sound, expecting a cannon or a cavalry charge. Your comrades are no better. Some mutter to themselves, others stare into the distance, lost in their own horrors. Desertion crosses your mind daily, but where would you go? You're in a foreign land, surrounded by enemies, your uniform a death sentence if you're caught. You're trapped, and the war is your prison. If you're lucky enough to be captured, your ordeal doesn't end. Prisoners of war face grim fates. In Spain, French captives were often handed over to guerrillas, who tortured or executed them. British prisoners in French hands might be marched to prison camps, but the journey is brutal. Starvation, beatings, and exposure are common. If you're sent to a prison hulk, like the British used for French captives, you're crammed into a rotting ship, disease-ridden and half-starved, with no hope of release until the war ends. Many die before that day comes. Escape is a fantasy. Even if you break free, you're a stranger in a hostile land, marked by your accent or your rags. By now, you're wondering if there's any point to this. You joined or were forced into this war for glory, duty, or just a chance to eat. But there's no glory in a ditch, no duty in a slaughterhouse. You're not fighting for Napoleon or the king, or even your home village. You're fighting to stay alive, to see one more day, to maybe, just maybe, make it out of this alive. But the war has other plans. Another battle looms, another march, another siege. You grip your musket, check your dwindling powder, and take your place in the line. You're a soldier in the Napoleonic Wars, and this is your life until it isn't. You're still here, clinging to life in the relentless churn of the Napoleonic Wars. The battles, sieges, and retreats have worn you to a husk, but the war doesn't stop, and neither can you. Your musket is heavier than ever, your body a map of scars and aches, and your mind a fragile thread stretched to breaking. You've seen the worst of humanity, your own included, and yet, somehow, you're still marching. Now, let's delve into the final chapter of this grim saga. The endgame of a soldier's life in the Napoleonic Wars. Whether it's discharge, death, or the faint chance of survival, the war's conclusion is as brutal as its beginning. Let's walk through the twilight of your service, where hope is a cruel mirage and the cost of survival is etched in blood. If you're still alive after years of campaigning, you're a rarity. The Napoleonic Wars chewed through millions. Some estimate 3 to 6 million dead, soldiers and civilians alike, across 2 decades. As a common soldier, your odds of surviving from 1805 to 1815 were abysmal. Disease took the most, followed by battle wounds, starvation, and the elements. If you're still standing, you're either impossibly lucky or cursed to endure more. But survival doesn't mean freedom. The war's end, with Napoleon's final defeat at Waterloo in 1815, doesn't automatically send you home. Armies don't dissolve overnight. You might be stuck in occupied territories, garrisoning some miserable fortress, or mopping up pockets of resistance. Your pay, if it ever arrives, is barely enough to buy a loaf of moldy bread, and your officers still treat you like dirt. Discharge, if it comes, is a bureaucratic nightmare. If you're a conscript in Napoleon's army, your service was supposed to last a set term, say 5 years, but wars don't respect schedules. You could be held indefinitely, especially if the emperor needed bodies. In the British Army, enlistment was often for life, unless you were invalided out or bought your way free, which was impossible for a penniless grunt. If you're wounded but not dead, discharge might come with a missing limb or a face scarred by shrapnel. You're sent home, if you can afford the journey, with no pension, no support, just a pat on the back and a good luck. Veterans flooded cities like London or Paris, begging or stealing to survive, their medals worthless in the face of hunger. Some turned to crime, others drank themselves to death. The society you fought for doesn't want you now. You're a reminder of a war they'd rather forget. If you're still in service post-Waterloo, demobilization is chaos. Armies numbering in the hundreds of thousands are suddenly surplus. You're herded into camps, waiting for papers that might never come. Food is scarce, disease still lurks, and boredom breeds trouble. Mutinies flare up as men, fed up with empty promises, turn on their officers. If you're French, the fall of Napoleon leaves you in a fractured nation, where royalists and republicans bicker over your loyalty. You might be forced to swear allegiance to a new king, only to face suspicion as a Bonapartist. In Russia or Prussia, you're just another peasant soldier, sent back to a village that might not exist anymore, your fields burned or seized in your absence. Death, though, is the more likely end. If it hasn't claimed you yet, it's waiting. A stray musket ball in a forgotten skirmish, a fever from a dirty camp, or a gangrenous wound could finish you before peace is signed. Even in the war's final days, men died in droves. The Battle of Waterloo alone left 73,000 dead or wounded in a single day, and the smaller clashes that followed mopped up survivors. If you die, there's no grand funeral. Your body is tossed into a mass grave, stripped of anything valuable by scavengers, friend or foe. Your name, if anyone remembers it, is scratched onto a regimental roll, soon forgotten. Your family might never know what happened. Letters home were rare, and the army didn't bother with notifications. But let's say you defy the odds and make it home. You're not the man who left. Your body is broken. Maybe you limp from a bayonet scar, or your lungs rasp from years of smoke and cold. Your mind is worse. Nightmares jolt you awake, filled with cannon fire and the faces of men you killed or failed to save. Crowds make you flinch. Loud noises send you scrambling for cover. You try to tell your story, but no one listens. Civilians don't understand, and veterans don't need to hear it. You're a stranger in your own village, haunted by a war that's already fading into history books. Work is hard to find. Your skills, loading a musket, marching in step, mean nothing in a plowman's world. If you're lucky, you find a trade or a family to anchor you. If not, you drift, one of the countless ghosts of Napoleon's wars. The war's legacy lingers in other ways. You've seen Europe reshaped, empires toppled, borders redrawn, entire towns erased. You've marched through Spain, Germany, Russia, leaving scars that won't heal for generations. The locals you liberated or plundered hate you. Their stories of your army's crimes passed down like poison. You might carry guilt for what you did, looting homes, burning crops, or worse, or you might bury it, telling yourself it was survival. Either way, it festers. The Napoleonic Wars didn't just kill men. They broke societies, economies, and the illusion of glory. You were part of that machine, and now you're its wreckage. As you sit by a fire years later, staring into the flames, you wonder what it was all for. Napoleon's empire is gone, his name a footnote or a curse. The kings and generals you fought for are fat and comfortable, while you're scraping by. The battles, Austerlitz, Borodino, Waterloo, sound heroic in tales, but you remember the mud, the blood, the screams. You were a soldier, one of millions, and your life was a coin spent without thought. You survived or you didn't, but the war took everything, your youth, your friends, your dreams. You close your eyes, hoping for sleep, but the war follows you there, as it always will. You're still here, a ghost of the soldier you once were, haunted by the Napoleonic Wars' relentless toll. The battles, the marches, the sieges, they've carved away pieces of you, leaving a hollowed-out shell that somehow keeps moving. You've seen the end of the war, or at least the end of Napoleon's empire, but the echoes of cannon fire and the screams of the fallen still rattle in your skull. This final chapter isn't about grand finales or heroic homecomings. It's about the quiet, grinding aftermath for a soldier who survived or didn't. Let's walk through the last steps of your journey, where the war's shadow stretches long past 1815, and the life you once knew is as lost as the comrades buried in unmarked graves. If you've made it past Waterloo, past the treaties and the pomp of peace, you're one of the few. The Napoleonic Wars left Europe a graveyard. Millions dead, countless more maimed or broken. As a survivor, you're a statistical anomaly, but there's no celebration in it. You're discharged, maybe, if the army's bureaucrats bother to process your papers. If you're French, the restoration of the Bourbon monarchy in 1815 means you're a relic of a regime they'd rather erase. Your service to Napoleon brands you a potential traitor, and you're watched, suspected, or outright shunned. If you're British, Prussian, or Russian, you're no hero either, just another mouth to feed in a world rebuilding from ashes. Your discharge papers, if you get them, are a scrap of paper that doesn't pay for bread or heal the limp you've carried since a musket ball grazed your leg. Returning home is a fantasy that doesn't match reality. If you're a peasant soldier, your village might be gone. Burned in the war, abandoned, or swallowed by new borders drawn by men in gilded halls. Your family, if they're still alive, might not recognize the gaunt, haunted figure you've become. You've aged decades in a few years, your hair gray, your eyes distant. The stories you tell, of Borodino's blood-soaked fields or the frozen retreat from Moscow, sound like madness to those who stayed behind. They nod politely, then turn away. You're a stranger now, your place in the world erased by the war's upheaval. If you're lucky, there's a plot of land to work, but your hands, trained for muskets and bayonets, fumble with a plow. If you're unlucky, you're in a city, one of thousands of veterans begging on street corners. Your uniform rags a cruel reminder of what you've lost. The physical toll is merciless. Your body is a wreck, scarred, weakened, and prone to ailments that never leave. A cough from years of sleeping in damp fields might turn into consumption, wasting you away. A poorly healed wound festers, or the stump of an amputated limb aches with every change in the weather. Pain is your constant companion, and medicine is a luxury you can't afford. Doctors, if you find one, are as likely to kill you as cure you, their remedies little better than battlefield hacksaws. You've seen too many men die from treatment to trust them. You grit your teeth, swallow cheap gin if you can get it, and keep going, because that's all you know how to do. Your mind, though, is the real battlefield now. The war never leaves you. A slammed door sounds like a cannon, a shout like an officer's command. You wake gasping from dreams of bayonet charges or the faces of men you killed. Men whose eyes you still see, wide with fear or hate. You avoid crowds because the press of bodies feels like a battle line closing in. You drink to dull the memories, but it only sharpens them. Your temper flares without warning, alienating the few who still care. No one calls it trauma yet. There's no word for the way the war has rewired your soul, but you live it every day. Some veterans find solace in religion, praying for forgiveness or oblivion. Others turn to violence, joining bandit gangs or picking fights in taverns. Too many choose a rope or a river, unable to bear the weight of their own survival. Work, if you find it, is a humiliating grind. Your skills, marching in formation, cleaning a musket, have no place in a peacetime world. Factories are springing up, but they want young men, not broken ones. You might haul crates at a dock, your back screaming with every lift, or toil in a field, competing with machines that do your job better. Wages are pitiful, and the war's economic scars mean prices are high. You've fought for empires, but you can't afford a decent meal. Some veterans band together, forming makeshift communities where they share stories and scraps. But even these are fragile, torn apart by desperation or drink. You're proud, in a bitter way, of what you endured, but pride doesn't fill your stomach. Society has moved on, but you're stuck in 1815. The war reshaped Europe, new nations, new rulers, new ideas, but you're a footnote, a relic of a time when men like Napoleon dreamed of empires. The history books will glorify Austerlitz and Trafalgar, but they won't mention you, the nameless soldier who carried 60 pounds of gear through blizzards, who loaded a musket with shaking hands as grape shot tore through your line. You hear young men talk of glory and honor, and you want to scream that it's all lies, that war is mud and blood and betrayal, but you don't. You've learned silence because no one listens to the truth. If you have a family, they're your anchor, but even that's fraught. Your wife, if she waited, might not understand why you're not the man who left. Your children, if you have them, fear your outbursts or shy away from your silences. You want to love them, to rebuild what the war took, but it's hard when you're half a ghost. Some soldiers abandon their families, unable to bridge the gap between who they were and who they've become. Others cling too tightly, desperate for something to hold on to. You try to find moments of peace, a child's laugh, a warm hearth, but they're fleeting, drowned out by the war's endless echo. Years pass and the world changes. Steam engines rumble, cities grow, and the Napoleonic Wars fade into legend. You're an old man now, or at least you feel like one, your body betraying you with every step. You sit by a fire, if you're lucky enough to have one, and stare into the flames. The war is still there, in the crackle of the logs, in the shadows that dance like soldiers in a line. You wonder if it was worth it. You fought for something. Maybe a flag, maybe a paycheck, maybe just to survive. But now it's gone, and you're left with nothing but memories you'd rather forget. You were a soldier in the Napoleonic Wars, one of millions, and your story ends not with a bang, but with a whisper, lost in the quiet of a world that's moved on without you. You're still with us, a weathered remnant of the soldier who once marched under Napoleon's eagles or against them. The Napoleonic Wars are long over, their battles now tales told by old men in taverns or etched in stone on distant monuments. But for you, the war never ended. It lives in your bones, your dreams, and the quiet moments when the world seems too still. You've survived the marches, the blood-soaked fields, and the crushing aftermath, but survival isn't victory. It's just another kind of endurance. Let's walk through the twilight years of your life, where the scars of war shape every step, and the world you fought for has no place for you. This is the final echo of your story, where the Napoleonic Wars claim their last toll, your legacy or lack of one. You're old now, or at least you feel it, though you might only be in your 30s or 40s. The war aged you faster than time ever could. Your body is a patchwork of pain, joints that creak from years of carrying a 60-pound knapsack, a back that never straightens, and scars that itch under threadbare clothes. If you lost a limb, the wooden peg or empty sleeve draws stares, but no sympathy. Illnesses linger, souvenirs of dysentery or typhus from filthy camps. A cough that started in a Russian winter might now be consumption, stealing your breath a little more each day. You've outlived most of your comrades, but life feels like a debt you're still paying. Doctors are a rare luxury, and their cures, leeches, mercury, or worse, are often more dangerous than the disease. You rely on folk remedies or sheer stubbornness, because giving up isn't in you, even now. Your mind is a battlefield you can't escape. The war's horrors replay in vivid detail. Cannonballs tearing through ranks, the gurgle of a bayonet foe, the frozen faces of men left behind in the snow. You wake shouting, or worse, silent, drenched in sweat. Daytime isn't kinder. A cart's rumble sounds like artillery, a crowd's chatter like a battle line's roar. You avoid markets, churches, anywhere people gather, because the noise and press of bodies pull you back to Waterloo or Austerlitz. You've heard of men locked in asylums for madness, raving about wars long past, and you wonder if that's your future. You don't talk about it, no one does. There's no name for this wound, no cure for a soul fractured by too much death. You bury it or try to with work, drink, or prayer, but it always claws its way back. Work is a daily humiliation if you have it. The world is changing, steam engines, factories, and new trades are reshaping Europe, but you're a relic, your skills obsolete. You might labor in a field, breaking your body for a pittance, or haul goods in a city, competing with younger men who never saw a battlefield. If you're in a trade, like cobbling or smithing, your hands shake too much for fine work, a legacy of frostbite or fear. Wages are low, and the war's economic ruin lingers. Bread costs more than you earn in a day. You've fought for empires, but you're poorer than the recruiters who lied to you years ago. Some veterans form guilds or beg for government aid, but pensions are rare and meager, reserved for officers or the well-connected. You're no one, just another face in the crowd, your sacrifice is forgotten. Your family, if you have one, is both salvation and struggle. Your wife, if she's still with you, bears the weight of your silences and rages. You love her, but the war has made you a stranger, quick to snap or slow to feel. Your children, if they exist, tiptoe around you, sensing the darkness you carry. You want to be the father they deserve, telling stories of harvests or fairs, but the only stories you know are of blood and mud. You teach them to work, to survive, but you can't teach them to unsee the hardness in your eyes. Some nights you watch them sleep, wondering if they'll ever know who you were before the war. If you're alone, no wife, no children. The loneliness is a quiet ache, worse than any wound. You've lost too many to the war. Friends, brothers, comrades, and the silence of an empty home is deafening. Society has no use for you. The Napoleonic Wars are history now, their heroes gilded in paintings or statues, but you're not in them. Napoleon is exiled or dead, his empire a memory. The kings and generals you served are distant figures, their promises of glory as empty as your pockets. Young men romanticize the war, inspired by songs of Trafalgar or Leipzig, and you want to grab them to tell them it was butchery, not bravery. But you don't. You've learned the world doesn't want your truth. Veterans like you are a problem. Too many, too broken, too costly. Governments talk of reform or progress, but you see none of it. The new Europe, carved by treaties like Vienna in 1815, is a place of factories and borders, not fields and muskets. You're a leftover from a time they'd rather forget. Your legacy, if you can call it that, is invisible. You helped redraw the map of Europe, topple empires, and birth nations, but no one thanks you. The villagers you liberated in Spain or Germany curse your name, remembering the crops you stole, the homes you burned. Your own people see you as a beggar or a drunk, not a soldier who held the line at Borodino. You might have a medal, a tarnished bit of metal from some forgotten campaign, but it's worthless except as a trinket to pawn. Your story, your real story, not the polished lies of historians, dies with you. You don't write memoirs you can barely read. The war's truth, the one you lived, is buried in mass graves or lost in the haze of gunpowder smoke. As the years creep on, you grow frilier, the war's toll catching up. You're in your 50s now, or maybe you don't know your age. Records were lost and time blurs. You sit by a fire, if you're lucky, or huddle in an alley, if you're not. The flames remind you of campfires shared with men long dead, their names fading like smoke. You think of what might have been, a life without war, a family unbroken, a world where you weren't forced to kill or die. You wonder if it mattered, if your suffering changed anything. Napoleon's gone, the kings are safe, but you're still here, paying the price. The battles, Jena, Wagram, Waterloo, are just words now, their meaning lost to those who didn't bleed in them. Your end comes quietly. Maybe it's the consumption, finally winning after years of fighting your lungs. Maybe it's a fever, a wound gone bad, or just a heart too tired to beat. If you're lucky, you die in a bed with someone to hold your hand. If not, you're in a poorhouse or a ditch, another nameless veteran gone. There's no funeral, no marker, Your grave, if you have one, is unmarked like the thousands you marched past. Your name fades, your story with it. The Napoleonic Wars move on without you into books and legends, while you're just a whisper in the wind, a soldier who lived, fought, and died in a world that never cared. You're still here, a fading echo of the soldier who once stood in the ranks, musket in hand, facing the chaos of the Napoleonic Wars. The years have piled on, heavy as the knapsack you carried through mud and blood. The war is a distant memory to the world, its heroes and horrors polished into neat stories for schoolbooks or tavern boasts. But for you, it's as close as your next breath, woven into every scar, every flinch, every sleepless night. You've outlived the battles, the empire, and most of those who marched beside you, but survival is no triumph. It's a slow, solitary march toward oblivion. Let's tread softly through the final whispers of your life, where the Napoleonic Wars leave their last mark, not on history, but on the quiet, unremarked end of a man who bore their weight. You're truly old now, or at least the world sees you that way. You might be in your 50s, maybe pushing 60, but your body feels a century worn. The war's toll is merciless. Your hands tremble, not just from age but from years of gripping a musket or clawing through frozen earth. Your back is stooped, your joints grind like rusty gears, and every step is a negotiation with pain. If you were wounded, the scars still burn or itch, a constant reminder of bayonets or grape shot. Your lungs rasp, maybe from the smoke of 1,000 campfires or the consumption that's been stalking you since Spain. You're a walking relic, your frame a testament to survival, but also to suffering. Medicine is a dream. Herbal teas or a neighbor's poultice are all you can muster, and they do little against the ailments eating you away. Your mind is a prison, the war its warden. You can't escape the memories. They come unbidden, sharp as a blade. A child's shout in the street becomes a comrade's scream. The clatter of a cart is cannon fire. You dream of faces. Men you killed. Men you failed. Men whose names you've forgotten but whose eyes you'll never unsee. You wake in the dark, heart pounding, or worse, you don't wake at all, trapped in a loop of battle or retreat. You've heard whispers of soldiers' madness. Men locked away for raving about wars long gone, and you fear you're not far off. You don't speak of it. There's no one to tell, and no words to capture the weight. You try to drown it in cheap spirits, but the war swims better than you do. Prayer, if you still believe, offers fleeting comfort, but even God seems deaf to a soldier's pleas. Life, if you can call it that, is a daily scrape. Work is scarce, you're too frail for heavy labor, too unsteady for skilled trades. If you're in a village, you might tend a small garden, coaxing meager vegetables from soil as tired as you are. In a city, you're a beggar or a scavenger, picking through refuse for something to sell or eat. The world is racing ahead. Railways snake across the land, factories belch smoke, and young men chase futures you can't imagine. But you're stuck, tethered to 1815, to the mud of Waterloo or the snows of Russia. Pensions, if they exist, are a cruel joke. A few coins a year if you can navigate the paperwork, which you can't because reading was never your trade. You fought for kings and emperors, but now you're invisible, a ghost in a world that's forgotten you. Your family, if you have one, is a fragile lifeline. Your wife, if she's alive, is as worn as you, her face lined by years of worry and want. You love her, or try to, but the war has made you a puzzle she can't solve. You're silent when she needs words, angry when she needs calm. Your children, grown now, have their own lives, their own struggles. They visit, maybe, but there's a distance. You're a stranger, a relic from a past they don't understand. Grandchildren, if you have them, are a flicker of joy, their laughter a sound the war can't touch. But even they sense your shadow, shying away from the hardness in your gaze. If you're alone, the solitude is a weight heavier than any knapsack. You've lost everyone. Comrades to bullets, family to time, yourself to the war. The silence of an empty room is louder than any battlefield. The world has no place for you. The Napoleonic Wars are a story now, their edges softened by time. Napoleon is a legend, his defeats and triumphs debated by men who never smelled gunpowder. The generals Wellington, Blücher, Kutuzov are statues, their names on streets or squares. But you, the soldier who loaded muskets in the rain, who starved in sieges, who buried friends in unmarked graves, you're nothing. Young men dream of war, fed on tales of glory, and you want to shake them, to tell them it was butchery, betrayal, a machine that ground men to dust. But you don't. You've learned the futility of truth. Society sees you as a burden, too old, too broken, too costly. The Europe you helped forge, with its new borders and fragile peace, has no room for its makers. Your legacy is a void. You changed the world in your small way. Every step you marched, every shot you fired helped topple or raise empires. But no one knows your name. The villages you passed through in Spain or Prussia remember you as a thief, not a liberator. Your own people see you as a vagrant, not a veteran. You might have a medal, a dented piece of tin from some forgotten campaign, but it's worthless, a trinket for a pawn shop. Your story, the raw, unvarnished truth of the war, dies with you. You don't write, don't read, don't have the means to leave a mark. The history books will speak of strategies and kings, not of you, the man who carried 60 pounds through blizzards, who survived on rats, who saw too much and said too little. Your final days creep closer, quiet as a sniper's bullet. You're in your 60s, maybe, or you've lost count. Time is a blur like the smoke of a volley. You sit by a fire, if you're fortunate, or shiver in a doorway, if you're not. The flames conjure memories. Campfires with men whose laughter you can still hear, though their faces fade. You think of what could have been. A life unmarred by war, a family whole, a world where you didn't have to kill to live. You wonder if it meant anything, if your pain, your loss, your survival served a purpose. The world moves on, new wars, new heroes, new lies. But you're still here, a footnote in a story no one reads. Death comes as it must. Maybe it's the cough, now a rattle that steals your air. Maybe it's a fever, a wound that never healed, or just a body too tired to fight. If you're lucky, you're in a bed, a hand to hold, a voice to ease you out. If not, you're in a poorhouse, an alley, alone with the war's ghosts. There's no ceremony, no salute. Your grave, if you get one, is a pauper's pit, unmarked, like the fields where your comrades fell. Your name dissolves, your life a ripple that fades. The Napoleonic Wars roll into myth, their truth, your truth, lost in the haze. You were a soldier, one of millions, and your story ends not with glory, but with silence, a final breath in a world that never knew you.